What's up, guys? You're going to absolutely love this episode. It is a comeback story from Benjamin Benomar. He went from losing so much in his life to being able to quit his W-2 and now invest in CoLiving, and was one of the top realtors in Atlanta for CoLiving investors. So he's your guy if you're in Atlanta, but this is really an emotional story for me because it shows that when we apply ourselves and when we put the work in, we can truly accomplish anything as long as we don't give up. I hope you're inspired by this story. If you're someone who aspires, or if you know someone who aspires to leave their W-2 job, he lays out the framework for exactly how he did that in this call today. And then we get into some great, juicy CoLiving details. Enjoy this episode and share it with your friends. This is like the first time I've actually seen you, so I know we're just diving in deep here, but good to meet you.
See, you're a familiar face, man. So you're all over the place. I feel like you've inspired a lot of us and inspired me and taken my co-living business to the next level. So seems like I've met you a dozen times already.
Cool, that's cool. All right, everybody. Well, welcome to another episode of Scale Your Real Estate. I've got a super awesome guest with me today, Benjamin Benomar. I'm saying that correctly, right? That last name?
That's right.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, I just want to welcome you to the show and just really excited for this conversation that we're going to have over the next 30, 35 minutes or so. I think it's going to be really helpful and impactful for people. Just a little intro on Benjamin is he is a realtor in Atlanta. Him and his wife run their own company, their own firm, whatever the technical word is there, Benomar Properties, serving the Atlanta area. And he's, of course, I'm sure if someone wants to buy a house, they can buy it through you. But I also know what's great about you is that you serve investors. And people who are listening to this are investors. So that's really cool. So if you're in the Atlanta area, Benjamin is also a fellow co-living investor. That's how him and I first connected. We're part of the same mastermind. It's a millionaire mastermind called GoBundance. And I remember, Benjamin, when we were first texting back and forth, getting to know each other a little bit, you said in a text that you eat, sleep, and breathe co-living. I think that was like literally a quote. So, man, I'm excited to have you on because that's what a lot of we focus on here is this co-living model that's up and coming. But yeah, man, welcome. Thanks for being on. I'm glad to have you.
Thanks for having me, man. Just want to give you a shout out as well. You're an inspiration to all of us. And I feel like you've taken my business and mindset in co-living to the next level. So I'm excited to be on here and share a little bit about my background and my knowledge. So thanks for having me on.
You got it, man. Thank you. Well, let's start with the background then. What was it about your past or how you were raised? Or I'm always so interested in what is it about people's past that made them so hungry for success? And you're obviously successful. You're 32 years old. You've achieved a lot. What most people hope to accomplish by 50, you've achieved by 32. And so, we'll get into some of the specifics of your co-living business and your home and kind of how you help people there. And I also really want to tell listeners that we're also going to dive into some of the pros and cons of pad split. Benjamin's really familiar with that. He actually helps people and connects them to pad split when they buy co-living homes in Atlanta. So, but tell us a little bit about just your background, your upbringing, and what about that made you want to be successful and made you hungry, and what maybe segue into that, into investing specifically. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I guess to take you way back, I'm a French citizen, so I was born and raised in France. I'm one of 5 kids. I'm an immigrant. So when I was 8 years old, my parents saw the opportunity for the American dream, right? So they dragged all 5 of us over to West Palm Beach, Florida, and didn't know English, didn't know anything about America. It was a brand new world to me. And, I think that's really where my drive and a lot of, what makes me came from. So just through the adversity, through seeing my parents struggle, to raise 5 kids in a brand new world. So they were both in the hospitality industry. They ran a couple restaurants that ended up not doing so well. But in West Palm Beach, Florida, they opened a French bakery, a Italian restaurant, so that they were really into starting a successful restaurant business. So as one of 5 kids, we kind of took care of each other. I knew that, my parents came here for the land of opportunity, and I could find my own opportunity as well, right? So I did all the things that I was told to do, right? Top of my class, worked really hard, um, you know, great SAT scores, basically just like sports, got involved as much as I could. And essentially, when in 2008, when a lot of people struggled, my parents their business ended up failing. So our house got foreclosured on. We actually lost our business visa, so I became illegal. And essentially, a lot of those struggles, right, made me just to continue to push harder and harder to get somewhere. So I remember when I was 18 years old, right, I had just graduated high school, and I was trying to figure out, all right, where's my next step? My dad had left to France. My mom had remarried, left to California. A family of 7 quickly just fizzled out, and just a family of 1, right? So I packed up my car. At the time, it was like a $1,500 car I bought from my best friend's family. It was like a hand-me-down. Packed up my car, drove up to Atlanta about 14 years ago when I was 18 years old. And the one school that accepted me was Georgia Tech. So just from having, being top of my class and having those grades and trying to do everything right through school, I was able to get into Georgia Tech as an international student. So that started my journey here in Atlanta 14 years ago. And just to tie it all up into CoLiving a little bit, one of the first properties that I lived in Atlanta was a 6-bedroom home. And I paid $300 for a room. I shared a bathroom with someone else. I think it was actually a duplex, 6-bedroom, 5-bath on each side. And there was a Georgia Tech side and a Georgia State side. That kind of opened my eyes into real estate, into the opportunity, got me kind of thinking and turn on the light bulb. But that's my background. It's very much like a immigration story where I saw my parents struggle, and that gave me the motivation to do better, and that's when I knew I had to be successful, and it taught me to work hard to be successful. So,
wow, man, I wasn't expecting that. I was like getting emotional hearing you tell that story.
I don't usually share that story too often, but there's a lot more to it. But that's the summary of it all.
Yeah, man, I want to commend you, and I really think somebody that's listening to this needs to hear this right now. And I might get emotional even saying it, because my wife and I were watching a little video this morning about a specific situation, but I always love this quote. It says, setbacks in your life are setups for a comeback.
Yeah.
And so setbacks are setups for a comeback. And we were listening to a story this morning. My wife and I have this girl, Brittany Turner, and she had just bought this house, and like these hurricanes destroyed it. She had this vision to like help people with this house. And not to get into her story too much, but anyway, it was just so inspiring, because, and it's same what you're sharing, man, is like, I know you've made a huge comeback. You did not succumb to, oh, this is just going to be my life. And then, man, it's cool too, because like what the listeners don't know is you just got married like a year ago, right?
Yeah.
You're now like you're creating your own family, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you learned lessons from your parents, and that you're bringing into your marriage. Just got back from your honeymoon in Thailand. So like that's your comeback story, right? Like part of your
for sure
story.
We worked really hard for that, and that's my motivation every day when it comes to like, all right, let's think about what my why is. Everyone always talks about what's your why. It's like, all right, it's my family. It's bringing up my family, and just building my own as well in the future. That's something I've got to look forward to as well.
Dude, that's inspiring. That's awesome. I wanted to make one quick note too. Like, I'm sure when you rented that first CoLiving house, you were not successful at that time in your life, right? It's 14 years ago. And I think it's just so cool, man, because like CoLiving helped you.
Yeah, absolutely.
$300 a month. Were your utilities included with that, bro?
No, we ended up splitting that. But the way the landlord ran it, it was like 6 people on one lease, and then we just split utilities. But I remember I think I made $800 a month just like bartending, and then I had some like job on campus. So yeah, it was down to the dollar at the time, and $300 was a dollar. It was a lot. Doesn't sound like a lot today, but it was a lot to me back then.
Right. But just the fact of like, if co-living hadn't existed and you had to get an apartment,
Oh
like,
yeah,
would have been effed. Like, how would you do that on $800? Just the fact that
student housing was $1,000 a month.
Right.
Like 1-bedroom apartment, or even a 2-bedroom splitting with one person. Right. It was significantly more. So there was no way I was going to do it without some kind of co-living arrangement at that time.
Right. So I hope everybody listening hears that. Is like, it's one of the things I'm super passionate. So it's one of my whys, is because this helps people. This brings people up, and now you're such a cool success story with that. So take us from there, man. So you get to Atlanta, you have this drive, you want to build yourself back up, you get into Georgia Tech. How do you go from there to starting your own team, investing in real estate, and now specifically, you're focusing a lot on investors? Give us kind of the highlights of that journey, and maybe even as a secondary question, just what advice you would have for somebody, that's maybe in a similar position to where you were 14 years ago. That's like, okay, like a lot of shit has happened, and this was not the life I thought I was going to live.
Yeah. To be honest, at that time, I had no idea I'd be where I am today, right? What I was thinking at the time was like, all right, let me get my engineering degree. And I knew I could do it. And that was my 100% focus. Just pay for school, pay for school, and get my engineering degree so I can get a great job, get the income. And that was my American dream, right? The thing that kind of shifted, though, is as I got my engineering degree, got my first job, and I looked around, for me, I always had an entrepreneurial mindset just from my parents owning restaurant businesses, from, understanding where the true opportunity is, having those aha moments along the way. One of them being, oh, I'm sitting in a co-living property. It's helping me a lot, but let me think about, how is this benefiting the landlord? How are they maximizing their return? I knew at some point real estate was going to be part of my life, and it was a way to build wealth. I didn't know exactly how to get there. But as I graduated, got my mechanical engineering degree. I remember that moment when I got my first paycheck. I got my first full-time job, right? It was like, wow, I've got more than $50 in my account for once, right?
Let's go.
So that was an amazing feeling, but it quickly changed, and I knew that it wasn't fulfilling enough. And I spent about 5 years doing tech consulting. So I actually shifted from engineering to consulting, and I knew I wanted to be a little bit more business oriented, work with clients, have more of a consulting capacity and influence. So I shifted that, and it was a great job. I got a great salary, helped me save money, and I still continue to have that idea of real estate. And a few years into it, I learned about bigger pockets, started to read about real estate investing, how I can take part of that. I learned the word house hacking from bigger pockets. I started to network with the communities here, the wholesalers, the realtors, and I knew there was something there. I wanted to make a shift, and I knew I wasn't necessarily happy in my position in the corporate world in the 9 to 5. I was traveling a lot as a consultant. And I wasn't, at the end of the day, working for me, and I was always answering to the boss or to someone, right? And I knew I wanted eventually to create my own thing. So one thing led to the other. In 2017, I had enough money saved up. I knew that I was going to put 5% down on my first place. So I worked really hard to save money for several years. And by the way, I had about 75,000 in student loan debt that I was paying at the same time. But yeah, I bought my first place. I didn't really know what it would look like. I just knew that I wanted to bring in my friends from that first co-living that I moved to in Atlanta 14 years ago. I had roommates all throughout that time, right? That's how I was able to have affordable housing. Even after college, I lived with two of my best friends in a townhome. We didn't own it, but we split the rent, and that's what allowed me to save and get ahead. So I was used to roommates, and I was like, okay, let me make a goal to save enough money for my first down payment. I worked with a realtor, which wasn't necessarily, she was great, but she wasn't necessarily investor focused. But I knew what I wanted, and I probably drove her nuts. We looked at 60 different properties, and after 7 months of this journey, because I almost like had analysis paralysis, right? I didn't know what I want. I was looking at a 2-bedroom condo. Maybe I'll just live with one roommate. I was looking at, a 3-bedroom townhome. And what I settled for was a 5-bedroom, 3,200 square foot house, which I moved my girlfriend into the master, and then I brought my two other roommates. They moved in with me, and my entire goal was, let me see if I can cover my mortgage. I think it was like $1,900 or $2,000 at the time. It was a $300,000 home in South Atlanta here, which was kind of a gentrifying area. I had done a bunch of research, and from my networking, I was like, oh, there's tons of development here that's about to happen. I know I'm going to have some great upside. Which is just icing on the cake, but let me focus on trying to get my mortgage covered. And I know that was going to get me ahead. So that's what I did. That was my first house in 2017. I bought a mansion, essentially 3,000 square feet for $300,000,
That's
and
huge.
I lived, rent free. I think we basically just split utilities, and I had maybe $50-$60 a month that I had to pay, and everything else was covered. So
Wow. Man, there's so many nuggets. I hope everybody listening to that is able to extract. Let me see if I can extract some of the nuggets from this. I really love what you shared about how you were focused on the next step, like engineering degree was the next step, but it's like you also kept one eye in the future of like, well, what else could I be doing? What else is there? Is there something better than this? And I know that sometimes gets some bad rap because people are just like, well, focus all on what you're doing. But I really hold to this philosophy of like, do the next thing and then like look towards a mountaintop every once in a while. So you're headed in the right direction. You still know you're going up. So I love that you did that. And then at this time that you got your first house, are you still in your W-2 job?
I'm still in my W-2 job. I'm about 3 years in to my W-2. So yeah, I'm still working for the man.
Right. Okay. So I want to know how did you end up transitioning from that to really working for yourself in real estate? How did that transition happen? Because that's a big deal for a lot of people is being willing when you do find that thing, right? So you've got one eye on the mountaintop as you're climbing, but you're still doing the next thing in front of you. You're not focusing all your energy on the mountaintop because then you're just distracted and you don't get anything done. But then like at some point you have to be willing to give it all up. You have to be willing to let go of what you thought was your American dream, which was being an engineer. You'd accomplished it, bro. Like, at this time you owned a mansion and you had a W-2 job. Like that had to be the American dream, right? Living with your girlfriend, got a couple of fun roommates. So like how did you go from that to being able to let that W-2 go and move into this next season of your life? What did that transition look like and how did you do that? And what was your mindset around it? Because that's so tough for people when they've achieved something that for a lot of us, that W-2 was the dream.
Yeah, for sure. It wasn't easy. I think at the time, the first mortgage payment was due, first rent checks came in, and I was like, wow, it was almost like a similar feeling to my first paycheck in my W-2 job after college, right? It was like, wow, there is something here. Like, this is super powerful. And essentially, for the next 12 months, right, I was able to save even more money. Like, I got rid of my housing payment, which is the biggest expense that most people have, right? So I was able to save more money. And at that point, I was like, okay, I've got enough for another down payment. Let me maybe start looking at another house that we can house hack and move into, and I'll rent out all the rooms for my first one. So actually, just a block away was a 2,500 square foot, 4 bedroom, 3 bath. It was a foreclosure. And at that point, I, had bought my first house. I was a little bit more confident. This one needed a little bit of work. And for my engineering degree, I was like, oh, I'm pretty handy. Like, I can figure this out. So put in a bit of sweat equity, ended up buying it. It took some time. It was a HUD property, a foreclosure, but it was built in 2005. It had just been neglected through the crash of 2008 and needed some work, right? So ended up bringing in some contractors to do some of the heavy lifting, but I did everything else, right? We painted the property, put up some new fixtures, made sure everything worked, moved into that, and brought my roommates over, and we backfilled the first house. And at that point, when number two co-living, I was making money from my first. I was now cash flowing from my first one, and I was still living for free on my second. I was in a much better spot and more confident spot. And again, I'm still looking at the mountaintop, as you say. It's like, where can I go from here? And at that point, I was basically living financial free. Like, I was making some money that could pay for food and my basic expenses, and I was living for free in my house. And I really, at that point, for about 6 months, I really dug deep into, okay, what can I do? I really love real estate, been networking with all these great individuals, finally getting into real estate investing, understanding property management. I'm doing a little bit of contract work. So with my engineering degree, I considered being a general contractor. But just from my experience of rehabbing that home, I knew that wasn't specifically for me. When I was starting to understand property management, and I looked into property management, but from the business model that I looked at, you really had to scale really fast to start making money in property management. So being a realtor was a natural transition, as I looked into, I never thought I'd be in a sales position from being an engineer, but through my consulting experience, I was like, oh, I'm just handling clients, but I'm going to start helping other people house hack and other investors invest. That's a way where I can really shift from my corporate job into real estate and owning my own business just by helping people do what I want to do long term. So, the confidence came from being mostly financial free and just the drive of, I really want to own my own thing. I really want to transition from a corporate job to running a successful business. And co-living was a massive part of that, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't, necessarily, I was in the best financial position that I had been because of co-living for the first time. So that's kind of where that transition led. And I put together a 6-month plan to leave my position. I was in good graces with my boss. I think I gave a 6 weeks notice, right? And I got my real estate license, I got licensed, and I remember, actually, it was such an emotional experience. Finally, like, I remember my last day. It's like, okay, it's my last day. I'm driving home. I'm never going to drive back to that office. And Lexi, my girlfriend and my wife now, she greeted me right at the house. I just fell into tears because I was like, wow, I finally like accomplished it. I like quit. And I was just so emotional at the time. And I remember the next day it was like, all right, let me roll up my sleeves. I kind of just quit, even though I planned it all out. I kind of quit cold turkey. And I remember the day after I quit, that was my first closing with my first investor. I think I probably made like a few $100s after all the broker fees. It was like a $70,000 investment property from this guy in Japan that wanted to invest in Atlanta, in South Atlanta. And it was like, just pennies for an agent commission check. But when I got that first check, it was like that feeling over again, like I can do it. And like I said, I just rolled up my sleeves, worked extremely hard, leveraged my network at Georgia Tech, leveraged my network at my corporate job, and I helped a lot of people, helped a lot of investors, and I'm proud to say that I think I closed almost 50 transactions my first year, which is like unheard of for an agent. Most new agents like close, maybe they help a couple people their first year, but quitting cold turkey and having that drive and knowing that I'm not going to have that W-2 paycheck anymore, and I really wanted to be successful in the real estate industry. That's what propelled me, and I worked every day to help as many people as I could. And the first year, I mean, it surpassed my expectations. I ended up making more money than I did in my W-2 job as an agent my first year. So, things really worked out for the best, better than I ever expected that first year.
Wow. I'd love to know some of the specifics that were in that 6 month. You mentioned a 6 month plan, because I think what you're doing right now, and then we'll kind of move into the specific co-living deal that I'd love to talk about here. But I think you're kind of laying out a template for anybody who really wants to quit their W-2, right? You have this vision for what you can accomplish. I wrote some things down as you were talking. You worked on both at the same time. I think that's a big thing that I see a lot of people kind of have, this all or nothing mentality. They're like, well, I just have to quit my job completely and then I hope this takes off. And it's like, well, no, you got that house, you house hacked, you moved into another place, and then you prepared. And I think one of the ways you prepared is you reduced expenses. Now, your way of reducing expenses was house hacking, getting that second property where now you're actually making money to live, which you already mentioned this, but like that's most people's biggest expenses. And even if you had kids or a wife at that time in your life, like the truth is you can buy houses with like apartments above the garage or a basement with a kitchen. Like there are ways that anybody can use what you're sharing here. Like anybody can use this. Hey, your kids and your family can live in the top, or you can buy the whole duplex thing. Buy the duplex, you live in one side, rent to the other. I mean, there's ways to do this. You created a plan, right? It was kind of your next step. You said, here's specifically how I'm going to do it. And then you followed through on that, man. Like you actually pulled the trigger.
It was scary, man. It was scary, but part of the plan was like, okay, let me make sure I've got some kind of savings, right? So I made sure before I put in that 6-week notice that I had about 6 months of runway. I didn't know if I was going to close a deal necessarily right away or it was going to take me 6 months. I knew that just talking to different agents, I knew that I had to do it full time. Like being a part-time agent is just, it's tough to be successful. And I wanted to be, 100% full in. So 6 months savings, got my license, and started to talk to my network, see who I would be able to help right out of the gates. Created the LLC, got all the business docs situated, made sure I was licensed, picked my broker. The broker at the time also was investor focused, and I knew that they were able to get me a lot of leads. So just networking in the industry that I was about to jump in, to know what to expect and to be proactive about some of those things. But it was a scary jump, and I didn't do everything right. Like, one of the big things that lessons learned that I had was, after you quit the W-2 job, well, you're no longer bankable. Like, I was like, oh, I'm ready for my third house hack. Hey, Mr. Lender, can I get another loan, right? And like, no, you're running your own business. You need like 2 years history. So I was like, oh, wow. So there was some mistakes where maybe I quit too soon. Maybe I could have bought a third property before leaving my W-2 job and things like that. So I definitely didn't do everything right, but I knew I wanted to jump into it, and I put together that plan and just went for it. And at this point in my life, I'm not looking back, and I'm happy that I've gotten to where I am.
That's beautiful, man. Yeah, the bankable thing is a really interesting thing. So maybe snagging that third property and then quitting the next day after closing.
Yep. Yeah.
That's great advice for anybody listening. I tell that some people are so focused on quitting, they don't think about that. But you're like, hey, let's just get all the loans you can get. Let's max the debt to income ratio out.
Yep. Yep.
So I want to talk a little, man, this is so good. This is so good. And honestly, man, this wasn't 100% what I was planning on talking with you about, but like we've kind of gone deep on this W-2 thing, but it's so relevant right now to so many people that I'm just so glad we kind of took the time to really chat about this. So just to put a bow on that thing and kind of move into the specifics of one of your deals, to share a little bit about that, what's one piece of advice you would give to someone? I mean, I know you just gave like 50 pieces of advice if people are really listening and taking notes, but just to kind of summarize it, what's one or two pieces of advice you'd give to someone who has that same passion? Like they want to be a full-time investor, they want to be a full-time business person, and they're struggling with quitting the job. What would you tell them?
Yeah. I I really believe in house hacking and co-living. So like you said, it doesn't have to be as extreme as me having roommates. You could get that duplex, you could get that property with a basement, but get rid of your biggest expenses. And the biggest way to do that, your biggest expense is your housing expense. So, by reducing your expenses and then really pour into your income, right? I did everything that I could to get those raises year over year to continue to drive my income up so that I could qualify for a loan, so that I could save enough money for my investment or for my business, or to be in a position where I can quit my job, right? So I would say, work as hard as you can on your current job. Like, what skills do you have today? What job do you have today? Is there maybe a side hustle that you can do to make a little bit more money? And make sure you're putting together that plan that includes some kind of savings, so that you're confident and you're comfortable, and you've got that leeway to really cut ties and with your W-2 and jump into being a little bit more entrepreneurial. So I would definitely look at your expenses, how you can decrease your expenses, increase your income. I really think house hacking and co-living is one of the best ways to do that. But I understand it's not for everyone, but that would be my biggest general advice.
That's so cool, man. Thank you for that. And it's becoming more popular here, man, is the truth. And this will be a nice segue into this deal. When I had my episode first come out, my podcast first come out on Bigger Pockets, this guy from Germany reached out to me. I think I told you this on the phone. He was like, man, like, you all Americans, you think this is like a new up and coming thing that you all have or whatever. And he was like, we've been living this way in Berlin for decades. This is like, everything's so expensive here. This is like how people have to live.
Right.
And that kind of opened my eyes to, what's coming this way. The shared economy, as I call it, is taking on more. The American dream used to be like my own big house. And then the millennial generation came out and they're like, yeah, the big house is cool, but like, what about experiences? And what about saving more money and or spending more money on experiences and travel and, being more free. And so we've seen this shared economy, Airbnb, Uber, just kind of take off more. And so that's a nice segue into this. When I was first getting to know you and we were kind of texting back and forth, you mentioned that kind of you have this house that's 9 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms. And I know for guys like you and I, we're like, yeah, it sounds like a great investment. But for the average listener, they're like, you have how many people, living in one house? How does that work? How do you get around regulations? So I'd love for you to just talk about the specifics of that particular deal, man. Like, how did you find it? how do you, what challenges do you deal with? How have you overcome them? And then something I actually just learned about you is that you actually self-manage this. So I think that that's really cool to talk about too. And so I know that's kind of a broad thing, but I'd love for you to talk about the specifics of the deal and then maybe transition to like how you manage it and some little hacks that you've learned or some little nuggets that someone could take away if they too are looking to maybe get their first, second, or third deal, co-living deal, and then maybe they're self-managing it, which I have a lot of students right now that they want to kind of manage their first 4 or 5, and then they'll turn it over to someone. So I think that's really popular. So
yeah, for sure. I think you're right. Like today, no hesitation. I'm looking at deals. Okay, well, can I make it an 8, 9 bedroom? How many bedrooms can I make? And I'm analyzing deals. We've got our eye on the next one. But the funny thing is, the 9 bed is actually my first house. So it was
I didn't know that.
Mansion. Yeah,
the 3,200 square foot one. That's a 9.
Right.
Okay.
And that was the transition that I had over several years. Is okay. I first lived in it. It was just my girlfriend and 2 of my best friends, right? 4 people in the house, got my mortgage covered. I move out. When I moved out, at that time it was a 5 bedroom, but it had 2 dining rooms. It had a movie theater room. It had a gym. We had a library. I mean, we sprawled out. We lived like kings and queens there, right? So when I moved out, I was like, well, I think I should probably maximize this a little bit. Let me maximize the 5 bedrooms. My goal is to get 5 roommates in there, 5 tenants. So that's what I did. And then, moved on to my next house hack, quit my W-2 job, and realized I wasn't bankable. I couldn't get that third house hack. So I was like, okay, how can I maximize the assets that I have, right? So for a year, I had 5 tenants in there, and they lived comfortably. They were extremely happy. And at one point, when the leases were up and many of the tenants were moving out, I was, thinking, okay, we've got all these extra rooms. We've got 2 living rooms, 2 dining rooms. Let me take 1 dining room away and 1 living room away. And I made it into a 7 bedroom. So at the time I thought that was crazy, like 7 people living, in the same house. I didn't really know anyone else that was doing it, but I was like, no, I can do it. I lived in a 6 bed. It's just 1 more. So it's a 7 bedroom. So I ended up getting one of my contractors. We put up some walls and doors and reorganized things, and it was a 7 bedroom, and it worked beautifully. Like I ended up getting 6 women that were going to school in Georgia Tech, Georgia State, that were all from all over, actually, the country and even the world, that came together. They ended up becoming best friends. And then there was it was 6 girls and 1 guy, actually, but somehow the dynamic worked. They all didn't know each other, but they created a community and they became best friends, to the point, like a couple years later, one of them got married, and all of their roommates were invited to the wedding and were part of the bridal party. Yeah. So it's a 7 bedroom, hit it out of the park, successful. And last July, actually, this is when I started to get to know you, Sam, and your community and what you're doing. And I was still in the mindset I had, invested in. At this point, I own another duplex. I helped my dad buy a property. I sponsored him and brought him back from abroad and got him a green card, brought him back to the US so he's my family here in Atlanta. So I've made several investments, but it was a happy 7 bedroom for a few years. And that group of 6 girls were graduating, started to, hey, we're moving out. We're probably going to move out and not renew this year. I had 3 great years with them. It's like, okay, what can I do now? I know there's like, there's an extra movie theater room. There's, all these extra rooms. At this point, I've been helping a lot of investors purchase pad splits and do their own co-livings. I had gotten new ideas. I had looked you up, Sam, and your community and what you were doing. I was like, I need to learn from other people and understand what other people are doing in other pockets. I really got to know Pad Split and what they're doing here in Atlanta, across the Southeast. And you gave me the motivation, Sam, because I was like, wow, this guy's got like 50 properties in the Carolinas, and he's running 8 and 9 bedrooms as well. And how is he doing it, right? And that's when I had a big shift in, hey, all the tenants know me by name. I need to run this as a business. So I basically copied your website, Sam, right? I created an LLC, Life Unlocked Rentals. It's unlocking your life through rentals, right? I'm helping others unlock their life. And Life Unlocked Rentals, and I created the LLC, and I was like, okay, from now on, all my tenants are going to be managed by Life Unlocked Rentals. It's not going to be Benjamin. And I looked at how all of your tips that you gave through your community, and how you put locks on the door, how you put, how you handle maintenance requests, how you basically create a process, right, and run it as a business. And that's what I did, and that gave me the confidence last year to turn it into a 9-bed. And so now it's a 9-bedroom, and it's been extremely successful as well. Like, everyone is extremely happy that the leases are up for renewal. I'm pretty sure like at least 6 out of the 9 are going to renew. Everyone is locked into a year lease, and they've really created a sense of community, and that's really been my basis and motivation and my success story to, like, okay, now I've got to buy more 8 and 9 beds, right? But yeah, to give you some specific numbers on the deal, I bought it for about $300,000. That was my first house. I put 5% down. So I think my total, like, all-in closing costs and down payment was about $20,000 or so. I lived in it for free for a year, moved out, started the cash flow. Once I moved out as a 5-bed, I think I cash flowed just under $1,000. As a 7-bed, it was right around $1,500 to $2,000 a month, and now as a 9-bed, it's cash flowing about $3,000 a month, and that's like after all expenses, all maintenance, putting even a maintenance reserve aside. It's one of my most successful investments. We did a cash out refi as well on it. We're able to pull out a lot of money, and that was another down payment for the duplex property that we purchased. So it's a home run. All the development that I had read about actually came in. It pretty much doubled in value. Yeah, it's my success. It's my baby. It's my first one. It's my largest one, and I just want to continue to create more of those. And it's helped me be successful, but it's also been so rewarding to see all the lives that I'm touching and all the tenants that are leveraging it. And it's not just students. I talk about students, right? But we've got everyone from, it's co-ed, fair housing, can't discriminate, right, based on age, sex, anything, right? So our youngest is 21 years old, and our oldest is, I think, in their 60s actually. And it's really weird, and everyone thinks it's weird, but they love it. They have a sense of community. I think every holiday or anything that comes up, any excuse on a monthly basis, they kind of come together on their own. So a lot of them are becoming friends as well, and it's really cool to see and to give back. And my whole thought on the vision for Life Unlocked Rentals is, let me provide the same kind of house that I was able to leverage when I moved to Atlanta 14 years ago, and what did I really need, and what worked and what didn't. So that's kind of what drives me to continue growing that. It's not just the financial side, but it's also helping 9 people.
Dude, this is so good. And It's so good. I mean, talk about one deal. And I hope people are taking this away because I have so many friends that are like, well, in order for me to retire, I need 100 units, 200 units. And like, here you are, man, with one home, like this one deal truly can change your life if it's the right deal. And I tell people this, like, evaluate deals, be patient. Let's find the right deal. And you had to learn along the way. But I hope that anybody that's listening to this kind of gets to skip, because my journey is very similar. I had like the 3-bedroom, then the 4-bedroom. Then I was like, can I do 5? Then I did 6, then I did 7, then I did 8. And that took like 8 years to learn that, you know? And it's funny because I just met this guy recently. His name is Dante, and he's in LA. He's doing CoLiving in LA. And he said that he had a mentor that, like you and I, that told him that he did the whole 4-bedroom, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-bedroom. He said, just skip it all, go right to 9 bedrooms. And Dante is just like, he didn't know any better. He was just like, okay. So his first house is like this 9-bedroom with an ADU. Wow. And it's like just crushing it in LA. You know, he's renting every room for like $1,200, $1,300 a month. It's insane, right? So I hope people listening to this are taking away, like, one of the great things about listening to podcasts like this, getting knowledge, talking to mentors, is like you get to just accelerate that process. You don't have to start and try with 3 and see if it works with 4. Like, no, like this, you can go right to 9. You can do that as long as you have, like Benjamin was saying, the systems that are in place. There's also something really cool I wanted to point out. You said, how can I maximize the assets that I have? And I think that this is something that investors, especially small-time investors, don't do often enough. Go back through your assets. If you have 1 house, if you have 2 houses, if you have 3 houses, and if it's a single-family house, is it still making cash flow? Is the return, the cash that you're making every month on the equity you have in that house still good? You know, if you have 100, you used to have 20,000 in equity, but it went up in value. So now you have 120,000. Is the return that you're getting for $100,000, $120,000, is it still good? And doing those calculations and maybe switching some single families over to co-living is a good idea for somebody listening to this episode. So I just think it's great, man. And look, for the average American, for anybody listening to this, if your financial freedom number is $75,000 a year, like maybe that's not your dream number, but maybe that's like at least that's 2 homes, basically, you know, at this level. 2 homes doing $3,000 a month is $6,000 a month. $6,000 a month times 12 months is $72,000 a year in net cash flow. So I get passionate about this, man, because like hearing your story fires me up, and it's possible, right? I want people to know it's possible to do this. It's possible to achieve financial freedom. And it doesn't take some insane thing that's so out there that they can't do it. Like you have just really made it real with $20,000 down, bro. Like, yeah, bank, borrow, steal 20 grand. Like we can not steal, of course, but like we can find a way to get 20 grand. Like, come on.
Yeah.
So freaking cool. I want to ask you one final question, man, and we got to wrap up here, but
sure.
Are you doing anything specifically to get that community to do what you just said, or is that just self-organized? And that's actually a very genuine question that I actually have for you. Like, because that's so beautiful that you have these stories about your communities coming together and the multi-generational aspect. I was homeschooled, so like my parents were always big on like, hang out with older people than you, how you go with younger people. That's what you have in your house. It's so cool. We get to learn from each other. But what would be your advice to someone who wants to do co-living and wants to have that community feel? How would you advise them to set it up, or little hacks, or anything you've learned about that aspect of it?
I think it's kind of 2 parts. The first part is I interview still everyone that comes into my house, right? Obviously follow the fair housing, and I've got to make sure I'm going through the application process the same for everyone, but I'm really asking tough questions. I'm meeting them, you know, they're submitting a form on the website, just very similar to yours, Sam. I'm asking key questions, interviewing them, making sure that like I'm in the back of my mind, I'm like, would I want to be their friend? Would I want to live with them? Are they a clean person? Are they responsible? Do they have, you know, the right mindset to you know, to be with in a co-living environment and be successful in a co-living environment. And whether they're already living in Atlanta or maybe, out of state, I set up a Zoom meeting. I'm seeing them face to face. I'm talking to them, interviewing them, and asking them those tough questions. So I think the application process and the interview process of who are you bringing in as tenants is really important. Making sure that you're not just accepting anyone that wants a cheap room, right? And the second part is what I've learned to do is create a medium for them to be a community. So, in the past, I have set up like, okay, when everyone moves in and all the leases have renewed, I'll actually give them like $100 Visa gift card, and they'll say, hey, have a pizza party. Like, go, and here's dinner on me. Get to know your roommates, right? So I've done that in the past. And then we actually set up a group me. So all of the tenants, we make sure that as new people come in, as new members to our community come in, we add them to this community chat for our home, and they're able to interface and get to know their roommates as well. So setting that up. And then I think third, if I can add a third one, is just really care about your home and community, right? These are properties that I've lived in myself, so I've made them quite nice. This is a home that I lived in and I want to live in, and I upkeep them. We completely paint them every few years, and we set them up quite nice. And one of my rules for our house is because of this being a 9-bedroom, we ended up building 2 extra baths because my rule is no more than 2 people per 1 bath. So other co-living strategies actually, are a little bit more, I think for Pat Split, the rule is 4-to-1, but for my communities, I don't want you to share a bathroom with more than one person. That's also what's made it successful. And just making your home the best you can, upkeeping it, and having the mindset of, can I see myself living here as well? That's going to attract the right kind of people that want to be part of that community. So it's caring about your home, working to interview and bring in the right kind of people, and then setting up a system or, things like a community chat for them to interface and talk amongst each other. So those are some things that I've implemented.
Those are some gold nuggets, man. Absolute gold. Well, Benjamin, man, just congrats on all your success. Congrats on your recent marriage. I guess I said recent, and then honeymoon, and just everything where you're going, man. And I know you're just getting started is the truth, right? And that's probably how you feel, because you're hungry. And I think you're hungry for more, and you're hungry to succeed. And I just really appreciate that about you. And we're kindred spirits in that sense. So keep up the great work. Can't wait to see you in a few years. And thank you for being on, sharing what was supposed to be 30 minutes, ended up being an hour of your story, man. This is going to inspire people. I hope you know that this is a comeback story. This is a comeback story from a low place to you now being able to inspire other people who are listening to this and might be in a very similar place. So thank you. God bless you. And I just really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Sam. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you.